First up, before we actually start soldering, we need to acquire the gear. This is solder, comes in a roll. This is 60/40. This is what I've been using for years and years. It's good stuff. You're also going to need solder wick. This is a biggie. You definitely need this in order to remove components or to help you unsolder things. This tool here is called a solder plunger. So you heat up the solder on whatever the job is, you put the plunger on top of it and you press the button and it sucks it up. This is called flux. It is a must, it is a biggie. You must have this for every job. So in other words, when you're going to solder two parts together, this helps it give it a better bond, and it also acts like a sucking agent, so it sucks the solder into the job. And obviously this is a soldering iron. If you're on a tight budget, these budget ones work just as well as the expensive ones. This is a 60-watt soldering iron and it heats up to about 250 to 300 degrees. So I used one of these for many years, probably about 10 years, until I changed over to the expensive one. And of course this is the expensive soldering iron, and what I mean by that is that you can adjust its temperature from 0 all the way up to 500 degrees. So I advise getting one of these if you can afford it, because in that way, you can use it on any job. I highly recommend buying this type of wire. It is called Kynar wire. It is probably the best wire that I've used for over like 30 years now. It is a single core wire and it's easy to attach to any point on a motherboard. Alligator clamps. You're going to need these in order to hold onto things and obviously solder to it. It just makes life a whole lot easier. Grab you some of this as well. You can use isopropyl, but I highly recommend this stuff before and after you've done a job, especially after when you're using flux. It's a good way to get it off. I'm going to show you how to remove a capacitor from an original Xbox motherboard. This is a 1.6 board. Word of warning, never ever put your hands in an open appliance while it's plugged into the mains power supply or even into a battery. As you can see here, this capacitor is 400 volts. Even after you unplug it, this thing can stay live for many weeks. So we're going to discharge this. Make sure your screwdriver or whatever it is that you're going to discharge it with has rubber on it. I also have rubber gloves and also have rubber on my feet and on the table. Or you can buy an official discharger, as you can see on the top right hand corner. So we're going to flip this thing over, touch the 2 points together, which is the positive and negative pins, and you'll hear a bang. And all that means is that it is now safe to touch with your hands, so it's released all that energy. I'm going to remove this capacitor here. It is a 6.3 volt. Any capacitor under 10 volts is safe to touch with your hands. That's if you haven't discharged it. Before you start soldering, always clean the tip of your soldering iron on a wet sponge. We're going to apply some solder to the pins of the capacitor. This helps remove it a lot easier. Now I'm going to grab the solder wick, place it on top, put the soldering iron on top of that, and just let it suck it up. You can tell when the solder is starting to stick to the solder wick because the solder wick is, well, I should say, brass in color. And once you start sucking up all that solder, it starts to turn silver. This will take you several attempts. You'll never get it on the first hit. Usually you would have to flip the board over as well to do the other side, because once you heat solder up, it starts to, gravity starts to pull it through. So yeah, you'll need to flip that over on the other side as well. I'm going to show you how to use the solder plunger as well. So you heat up the job or the pin there, place it on top, wait for it to heat up, and press the button to suck up the solder. Pretty straightforward. Just applying a bit more solder there. I'm going to show you the third and most easiest method to get a component out of that size. So I'm grabbing the capacitor with my finger and my thumb, flip the board over, I'm going to apply the soldering iron to each of the pins, just heat them up for a few seconds and then pull on it slightly. So don't pull on the component too hard, just give it enough pull to get it out. You'll feel it to move on its own as you heat up the pins. As you can see, there it is. Now I'm applying a bit more solder just to help remove it. As you can see here, I've flipped the board over and I'm going to go at it again on the top end.
Big finish out.
So once you're done, it should look like this. You should be able to see straight through the holes. So let's say that you're going to put the capacitor back in again, and the reason why you've removed it, you just wanted to test the component on its own on a multimeter. So now we're going to get a pair of pliers and straighten the legs. Grab our soldering iron, don't forget to clean the tip. Now we're just going to more or less wipe the end of the pins and remove any solder that's on there. When reinserting the capacitor, make sure that the white end or the negative end is matched up with the motherboard, and you can see there it has a white marking as well. Do not get them around the wrong way or the capacitor will explode or something else will explode or melt on your job or whatever it is. Once you've reinserted the capacitor, bend the legs outward. This helps secure it in place before you solder it. Usually when you buy a brand new capacitor or a new component, the legs are quite long, probably about 20 millimeters or maybe longer, and you just cut them to length. Now we're going to apply flux to the pins to help the solder adhere to everything. Now we're going to solder them together. A couple of seconds on each pin. Done. Now we're going to clean up the area we were soldering around, especially with the flux because it makes a big huge mess. Just using a Q-tip there to clean it all up. All done. So what I'm doing here is using the soldering iron to melt the outer sheath of the wire. You can use wire strippers, but I prefer to do it this way because it's quicker. Now I'm going to attach the wire to this point here. Just heat the solder up and attach it and then let it go after a couple of seconds. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you learned something today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Chat.